Welcome back to F1 Brake Check, the podcast that combines high-octane analysis with low-budget metaphors. The F1 circus returns to U.S. shores for the Miami Grand Prix, and we are here to preview all the chaos. We will also have the latest history lesson, and Corey will melt my brain with his latest round of Stump the Pundit trivia. All this silliness and more is up next on F1 Brake Check.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Brake Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Broom.
We're back with F1 Brake Check. My name is Scott Vick. I am one of your intrepid hosts, and with me, as always, is my ride or die, my pundit for life, Mr. Corey Broom. Corey, how you doing this week, sir?
Good. It's been a good week so far. How about you?
It's been a very good week. So, had a quiet weekend, but I'm ready to get back to action, and I'm ready for them to invade the Tropicals Miami Autodrome.
Right on. Yeah, it's a great track, man. I'm very much looking, especially having a week off. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, well, shall we jump into our history lesson?
Let's do it.
All right. In the world of motorsport, there are legends, and then there's Mario Andretti, a name that echoes across generations, transcends pop culture in a way that no other race car driver has, and is etched into the very DNA of racing. To say he was fast would be an insult to understatement. To say he was fearless is too simple a word. Mario Andretti was speed. He is racing. But how did a boy born in a war-torn corner of Italy become the most versatile driver the world has ever known? Mario Gabriele Andretti was born on February 28, 1940, in Montone, Italy, near Motuve, Croatia. When World War II ended, the eastern region of what was once Italy was handed over to communist Yugoslavia. The Andretti family, Italian through and through, became refugees overnight. They fled to a displaced persons camp in Lucca, Italy, where they lived for 7 long years. And then, in 1955, like millions before them, the Andrettis crossed the Atlantic. With just $125 to their name, they arrived in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, chasing the American dream. But for Mario and his twin brother Aldo, their dream had tires, an engine, and made a glorious roar. In the dusty backstreets of Montona, the Andretti twins raced around in cars built out of scrap wood. As teenagers in Lucca, the brothers worked parking cars. By the time they reached Nazareth, they built their own car and went racing for real. At night, they would sneak out and race on dirt tracks, hiding their hobby from their cautious parents. Mario was fast from the start, but he was also calculating, controlled. Aldo, on the other hand, pure fire. In 1959, Aldo suffered a massive crash that left him in a coma for 4 days. It was a warning shot, but Mario kept going. It was the end of Aldo's career. Mario wasn't just chasing speed, he was chasing destiny. Fast forward to 1965, Mario Andretti made his debut at the Indianapolis 500. Not only does he finish third, but he also wins Rookie of the Year. And that same season, he wins the USAC National Championship. Just like that, the kid from a refugee camp had made it to the top. A second USAC championship would follow the following year. But that was only the beginning. By 1969, on only his 4th attempt, he would claim the crown jewel of American motorsport, the Indianapolis 500. Piloting the famous number 2 STP Hawk, Andretti dominated the field. Victory at Indy had eluded so many greats, but Mario tamed the brickyard. There was just one problem. It was what became known as the Andretti curse. From that day forward, no Andretti would ever win Indy again. Not Mario, not his sons, not his grandsons. Engines would fail, tires would blow, lead laps would vanish in smoke. The curse of the Andrettis was born, but Mario never looked back. You see, unlike most American drivers, Mario Andretti wasn't satisfied with conquering just one kingdom. He wanted to reign across the entire motorsport empire. So he crossed the Atlantic into the cutthroat world of Formula One. And in 1978, in a season dominated by controversy and innovation, Mario Andretti did what no American since Phil Hill had done before, or has done since. He became the Formula One world champion. Driving for Lotus in the radical Lotus 79 ground effect car, Andretti was untouchable. He clinched 6 wins and beat out the likes of Niki Lauda and Gilles Villeneuve. It was a season of triumph, but also tragedy. At Monza, his teammate Ronnie Peterson was killed in a horrific crash. Andretti, crowned champion that day, called it the saddest victory of my life. Even glory has a cost, but Mario raced on. He raced in NASCAR and won. He raced in Le Mans and almost won, finishing second overall and first in his class. He conquered dirt ovals, paved road courses, street courses, super speedways, Pikes Peak, and much, much more. Sprint cars, midgets, Indy cars, F1 machines, he drove them all and drove them well. And here's the staggering truth. Over a career that spanned 5 decades, Mario Andretti recorded 111 career wins across all major forms of motorsport. That includes 4 IndyCar championships, 3 12-hour of Sebring victories, 1 Formula One world title, 1 Daytona 500 victory, and that historic Indy 500 win in 1969. But perhaps what makes him truly legendary isn't just what he won, but how he stayed competitive. In 1993, at age 53, Mario Andretti set the fastest qualifying lap at Michigan Speedway at 234.275 miles per hour. He was still outpacing drivers half his age, still fearless, still fast. Here are a few facts that might just leave your jaw on the floor. He's the only driver in history to win the Indy 500, the Daytona 500, and the Formula One World Championship. He's the only driver to win the famed Grand Prix of Long Beach in both Formula One and IndyCar. He raced in 879 professional races. In 1967, he competed in 52 races across 5 different disciplines and won races in all of them. In 1984, while testing at Le Mans, he recorded the fastest speed ever officially clocked on the Molson Straight, 241 miles per hour. And in 2021, at the age of 81, he drove an F1 car again, just for fun. And his time was competitive.
Wow.
And he shows no sign of slowing down. Having been appointed to the board of the new Cadillac F1 venture that hits the grid next year, Mario Andretti is more than a racing legend. He's a symbol of determination, grit, and audacity of dreams. From a refugee camp to racing royalty, he built his empire not with money or luck, but with talent, tenacity, and the sheer will to be the absolute best. When people say go faster, go harder, drive like your name's Andretti, they're not just talking about speed. They're talking about chasing greatness with no rear view mirror. So the next time you hear the roar of an engine, the scream of tires, or the silence before the green flag drops, remember the man who conquered them all, the king of versatility, the emperor of speed, the one and only Mario Andretti.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've known quite a bit about him, but not nearly to this extent. So I knew about some of his accomplishments, but not. God, man, he had it all, right? Even Pikes Peak, which I was really really surprised about. But that's really nice, man.
Yeah,
Again, it is a great summary of his career.
yeah, he truly was the master of versatility. I mean,
Yep.
it was not just did he, because the fact that not only did he, just be able to get into any kind of machinery and be fast, his feel for the car was just absolutely unparalleled. I
Yeah.
mean, he could get in anything and be fast quickly, almost immediately. And it was absolutely amazing. But not only that, but because of that versatility, the fact that, I mean, there's probably only maybe 3, 4 drivers in the history of all of motorsports that if you take someone who doesn't know motorsports and you say their name, they'll know who he
Oh
is.
yeah, no
You
doubt.
know, Richard Petty, AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti, maybe
Schumacher.
Sterling Moss,
Schumacher.
maybe,
I think
maybe
everybody would know
Schumacher.
Schumacher. Yeah.
So, there's only a handful, but I mean, but Mario even, goes above all of them. I mean,
Right.
he's been name dropped in, a Beastie Boys song. He's been, he's been name dropped all over the place. I mean, he transcends pop culture, because of his enormous, personality and the fact that he's such a super nice guy, a guy with that much winning, with that kind of winning pedigree, and the fact that he is still so amazingly nice. I actually got to take a picture with him, and I'll have to find it and throw it up on a future podcast, because I just remembered this, that I actually have a picture of myself with Mario at the Indy 500, and this would have been about 2007, 2008, when his grandson Marco Andretti was actually in the show and came really, really close to winning the damn thing.
Wow.
So, and it's just, but he was super amazingly nice, would stop, take pictures with fans and everything else, sign autographs.
Awesome.
He's just the nicest guy, and you would think that a guy like that would have an ego, the size of Indiana, but he doesn't. And it's so incredible to see him. But and he's still, to this day, I saw an interview with him probably about 6 months ago, when he first got appointed to the board at Cadillac, for their F1 project, before they'd even gotten their final approval. And he's still just as sharp as he has always been. And it's amazing to see him. So,
that's awesome.
And then of course, there's always the famous stories. There's been probably maybe 8 or 10 variations of it, about somebody getting pulled over, about a cop pulling over a car for speeding. And as he's rolling up to the car, he's going, who do you think you are, Mario Andretti? And he looks in the window and it's Mario Andretti. Or Bobby Unser used to tell a variation of the story is Bobby Unser used to tell the story about how he and Mario were on their way to an IndyCar race, and Bobby was driving and he got pulled over, and the cop asked him, who do you think you are, Mario Andretti? Because he didn't recognize Bobby. And Bobby takes and points across over to the passenger seat, goes, no, he is. So there's all kinds of variations on that story, so I mean, it's just, Andretti's just one of those guys that he's bigger than motorsports. He's bigger than just about anything. And I love to listen to his stories. All right, so that's our history lesson for this week. Tell us what you think. Tell us, more of, who you'd like to hear us take and do next. What kind of stories would you like to hear? Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so we're moving on to what is, as anyone who's been following this podcast for any period of time at all knows, that this is my absolute favorite time of the week. So I am a longtime fan of Formula One, and I have been a student of the drivers and the history of Formula One even before I became a fan. Now, Corey is somewhat of a newer fan, and I say newer in quotes, because he's been following the sport for probably about 8 or 9 years now. But so this is the chance every week where Corey will ask me a series of questions in our segment that I like to call Stump the Pundit. So Corey, what do you have for me this week?
So this week, I've been planning on writing a blog on Christian Horner. I just haven't gotten around to it. So I figured, why not roll that into Stump the Pundit today. So that's what we're going to go through is, how well do you know Christian Horner?
Not very well, so let's go.
All right, I might actually stump you a few times then. That's good. I'm sure there's a few in here that you'll know. Okay, so first up, what year did Horner become team principal at Red Bull?
2009.
2005.
2005.
Very close. Very close.
Okay.
All right. So before he became team principal, what role did he have in motorsport?
That I don't remember. That one you got me on.
He was a driver actually in Formula 3000.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's one. Here's two that I know for sure you will know. Who is Christian Horner married to?
Jerry Hallwell, former Spice Girl.
That's it. Yeah. Married in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Which driver won Red Bull's first Formula One championship?
Sebastian Vettel.
That's right. Yep. Yep. And one more just for fun. Let's see here.
Okay.
What was the name of the racing team Christian founded before joining Formula One?
I'm going to go with the simple answer of Horner Racing or Horner Motorsports. I don't know.
Arden International. He established
Okay.
it in 1997 so he could compete in Formula 3000.
Okay. Yeah,
And
I
that's
didn't.
it for Stump the Pundit.
Yeah, I hadn't really followed his pre-Formula One career that
Yeah,
closely.
yeah.
So that was cool. That was interesting. Very nice. All right then. So let's take and jump into our news and reactions, and we're gonna do our preview of the Miami Grand Prix this weekend. So first off, let's take and talk the latest driver rumors. So we're gonna take and break down how much stock we put into each one. So my first one for you, Corey, is how much stock do you put into the idea of George Russell going to Red Bull at the end of this season when his contract's up?
Only if Max leaves or makes it known that he is going to leave, only then would I think that. Primarily, I think that, I definitely give this a lot of credence because one, George Russell has been seen to be talking to Red Bull, so that's a known fact. But the other thing is, from Russell's perspective, you always have to look out for number one in Formula, almost any career, honestly, but especially in Formula One. So if Max were to leave and go to Mercedes, he would be the guy out. They would not get Antonelli out because he's the developing driver. You would have to replace your number one. He being George Russell, is the number one. So I think it would be very, very smart of him to start looking around and at least talking to other teams. What say you?
Yeah. I completely agree with you that it'll literally be if, because everybody knows that Toto has an enormous erection for Max, and he wants Max in a Mercedes. He wanted Max in a Mercedes back when Lewis was still there. So he's trying very, very hard to get Max over there, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So yes, you're right. If Max goes to Mercedes or if Max leaves Red Bull, yes, I think that George is definitely in there. In at Red Bull. As probably as the second to Yuki.
Yeah.
Now, having said, because you're right, that Antonelli is the future. Toto has made absolutely zero bones about the fact that Antonelli is the future of Mercedes. So they are not, unless he just completely goes out there and lays a turd for every race for the rest of the season, is the only way that Antonelli is going to not be in a Mercedes next year. He has already proven in the first 4 races in one sprint his mettle. He's already proving.
Yeah.
He's proving the doubters such as myself and to some degree you.
Yeah.
He's proving us wrong, and he's proving his ardent supporters like Toto that they were spot on. This kid is a revelation, and at least way so far. So you're right. They're not going to give the heave-ho to Antonelli. He's in there. He is solid for the next few years. So, but now with George, his stock is definitely on the rise because now not being in the shadow of Lewis, we've already seen that performance this year, that his performance has just, he's taken his performance to another level this year in a way that we hadn't seen in the last couple of years. Because now that he's not underneath the looming shadow of a 7-time world champion, he has taken, what's the word I'm looking for here? He's taken he's chomped on the bit. I don't even know what cheap metaphor I'm looking for here.
Yeah.
But he has taken and he's risen to the occasion. There's what I was trying to say. He's definitely risen to the occasion now that he's not in Lewis's shadow anymore, and he is doing everything that he could possibly do in a racing car at Mercedes, and his stock is just continuing to rise. So I think that the only way that George gets let go by Mercedes when his contract expires at the end of the year is only if and only if Max Verstappen decides to come to Mercedes.
100% agree.
So, with that being said, let's take and talk about the next two rumors. So, there's rumor number one, which is Max is going to Mercedes because Toto Wolff wants him in there. But there's also the rumor that we've already talked about a couple times, but it seems to be gathering a little more momentum this last week in the fact because Max was spotted talking to Lawrence Stroll at some point that Lawrence Stroll's going to take and back up the money truck to Max Verstappen's door and dump a Nike load of cash on his doorstep, and that he's going to go to Aston Martin, that he and Fernando Alonso are going to team up for next season. So which one do you, so first of all, my first question to you is, what rumor do you give more credence to?
I mean, honestly, I think both of them are very valid. I think both of them, it would make sense for both teams to want Max. I mean, honestly, who wouldn't want Max at this point in his career? I mean, there's maybe Ferrari because they're chock full of drivers right now, but they would be literally the only team that wouldn't want them. Now, the ones that can afford him would be Mercedes and Aston Martin. Of that, as a fan, I think that I would love to see him at Aston. I would love to see that. But practically, I think it's probably going to be Mercedes. Obviously, money not being the object. I think that, obviously not knowing Max personally, just knowing him, from his career and his interviews, it would seem to me that he would want more than cash. He wants his name to be basically etched in the halls of F1 lore. So I don't see him really going to Aston unless they just, like they did with Newey, right? Gave him almost $1 billion. Now that might move him. Otherwise, I think that practically he will be at Mercedes if that's what he wants to do. If he wants to leave Red Bull. What say you?
Okay, so a couple things here. All right, first of all, I don't think I think that it's really going to come down to is Max is going to take and he's going to read the tea leaves, because the biggest thing he is concerned about is how competitive the car is going to be next year when the regulations change. He's going to look at things like how the car is developed, how the new cars is developing, and how it's, looking in the simulator and in all of the simulation runs and things like that, and how strong the Ford power unit is going to look going into, so I think by the summer break, he's going to have a little better idea of which way he's leaning. Now, with that being said, it's going to be the same thing, as he's going to be asking the exact same questions of Aston Martin and how well is the car being developed under Newey. He already knows that Honda is already said that they're having some issues with their power unit under the 2026 regulations. So that's going to loom very big in his mind. Now, we've talked about it before. Honda is a company that takes and solves these problems probably better than anybody else on the planet, with the exception of maybe Mercedes. So Honda will right the ship, and he knows Honda inside and out. And, for the past few years of having a Honda power unit behind him, powering him to championships. So he's going to have to take a look at that. He's also going to have to see, is the rumors that Mercedes is already kind of cracked the nut on the 2026 power unit regulations, and that they're already ahead of everybody else in that development, which was the same thing that happened, 12, 13 years ago when the power unit regulations changed from the V10s to the V6s with the turbochargers and the hybrid power. He's going to be looking at all of that, and he's going to make his decision based on which team he thinks is going to give him the best shot at winning, period. Now, me personally, I'm leaning towards the Aston Martin deal, because the thought of having Lauren, because I see the combination of a Newey designed, because as we've seen multiple times over his career, Newey just seems to inherently be able to build a better car whenever the regulations change.
Hmm.
And again, Honda power. So I think those two things, plus the money that Lawrence Stroll is going to take and throw at him,
Yeah.
that's just going to be a bonus. But I think that Aston Martin, if he sees that things are working in that direction, I really see him going to Aston Martin and teaming up with Fernando Alonso next year.
That would be great, man. Like I said, as a fan, I really would love to see him teamed up. I think that would be a phenomenal play for both of them. And both of them driving for that team next year, that would almost be a slam dunk as far as the constructors go.
Yeah, I do think that, if they get it right, yes, I do believe that it would almost be, you could almost take and write their name on the,
Yeah,
the constructors
exactly.
trophy now.
Go ahead. Yeah,
you know.
exactly. Etch it in now, boys.
So with that being said, that whether Max goes to Aston Martin or whether he goes to Mercedes, rumor has it that Lawrence Stroll has basically told Lance, pack it in, you're done. Now, whether there's any credence to those rumors, because there's not been any kind of solid, but there's been reports coming out of the Aston Martin factory that when the last few weekends, when Aston Martin has performed so woefully, Lawrence Stroll has been on a tirade. He has been in there telling people, this is not good enough. This is not what I hired you for. This is not what I'm paying out all of this money for, is for you guys to go out there and be the seventh or eighth best team on the grid. And I think he is, with that in mind, there's rumors that he has basically told Lance that whether Max signs with us or not, whether we take a rookie driver, but you're out next year. You can go over and you can run the hypercar over in, the WEC. You can go run Le Mans and Sebring over in the US in the IMSA series, but your days as a Formula One driver are done. And what's your thoughts on that?
No,
Do you think there's any credence to that rumor?
100%. Because again, he being Lawrence Stroll is Papa Stroll is going out and he's making all the moves to have a championship team. You have a championship team, but you don't have a championship driver. That doesn't play into his moves and his strategies so far. Again, outsider looking in, I have no ends to Aston Martin at all, but looking at the outside, looking at the moves that he's making, he wouldn't be throwing $1 billion or near $1 billion to Newey to get him to come over. He wouldn't be trying to get Max to come over for probably near the same amount, if not more. He wouldn't be making all those moves if that seat, his son's seat, is going to be still occupied by him. There's just no way. And just being objective about it, you can't be in that seat next year. In fact, you shouldn't even be in Formula One next year. There's no team that's going to sign him.
No.
He's a good driver. He's just not a good F1 driver, especially compared to the talent that we have today.
Yes. It's like we talked about, I think not last week, but 2 weeks ago, that, to be a Formula One driver today, what the drivers that we have on the grid right now, are they the 20 best drivers, in the world right now? No. Are they in the top 100? Absolutely. And I would say most of them are in the top 50, but Lance has had his time. This year he has consistently underperformed.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the true measure of, as anyone will tell you, the true measure of a Formula One driver is first and foremost, how do you compare to your teammate? And when your teammate is qualifying 7, 8, 10 places ahead of you, and you're not even making it out of Q1, something tells you right there that, okay, your performance is no longer there. It is
Right.
time to pack it in.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I think he's going to see this writing on the wall. And I'm pretty sure that, but, probably sometime within, a few weeks after the summer break, we'll see the announcement that Lance Stroll is retiring as an F1 driver, and they'll announce something of where he's going to next,
Yeah.
maybe.
Right. Right.
So I definitely, I put, on a scale of 1 to 10 of how much credence I put into this rumor, I would put it at probably about a 7.5 or 8.
Yeah. Because again, you wouldn't make these moves if the one driver that's basically your anchor bringing you down
Mm-hmm.
would still be
Your
there next
albatross.
year. Albatross. Yeah. I mean, there's just no way. Why would you do that? You wouldn't spend
Yeah.
all this money just to throw it away. You want to do something with it and actually have an investment going within your team. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would rate this to a 9.5. Seriously, I'm that
Yeah.
confident that he being Lance won't be here next year.
No, I agree. Okay, so moving on to the next one. So, this week we got the announcement that Williams is going to stop development on the 2025 car after the Miami Grand Prix and focus all of their resources on developing the 2026 car for the new regulations. Now, my question to you is do you think this is the right move for Williams, or do you think that they're giving up too early?
Personally, I think they're giving up too early, but I don't know their finances. So they may have only enough finances to start, say, look, we're not going to win the championship this year. There's no way, our car's not fast enough. It's not competitive enough. Stop here. Let's take what we have, invest it in 2026 so we can knock it out of the park, so to speak, when we get to 2026. So I don't like it as a fan, certainly, because I do like seeing them, in the mid tier and leading the mid tier, but I totally understand it. Again, hopefully next year we can actually see them maybe being up in the 4th and 5th places. Hopefully, especially with signs. I think that'd be awesome. What about you?
Well, I'm like you. I don't particularly like it, but I totally understand it
Mhm.
in the fact that they came out of the gate. We've already talked about it before, earlier this season that, they definitely came out of the blocks at the very beginning of the season that they were without a doubt, they were the top of the midfield. They were solidly, the fifth fastest car, behind, the top four. And so they were already had a step ahead of all of the rest of their competition further down the grid.
Yeah.
By them stopping, they're still going to have their advantage going into Miami. They're bringing in a series of upgrades to Miami, which will be the last upgrades for the 2025 car. Now, having said that, do I think that will be totally the last one? No, I'm sure that they'll find a handful of things during the season that they'll
Sure.
say, oh, well, if we make this one little tweak that won't
Yeah.
cost us a huge amount of money, we're still going to make that change. Or they might still have something that they already had planned that may not be ready for Miami
Mhm.
that they'll bring later on in the season when that part is ready. But, I think that the other teams behind Williams in the constructors, they still have some ground to make up. So it
Yeah.
will still take a little bit of time before they catch up to Williams. So Williams might be able to take and build a big enough lead that will still
Sure.
see them finish the year at, in the, at near the top of the midfield.
Right. Right.
So totally get it why they're doing it. It's not unprecedented, So I mean, Haas has already said that they're planning pretty much the exact same thing. That's why they didn't even really come out with a totally new car for this season, and then
Yeah.
basically they started this season with an iteration of last year's car.
Right.
For the exact same reason as they're taking their money and they're investing more of their money and their budget cap towards the development of next year's car as opposed to throwing, because I mean, you really could kind of think of it as, developing, spending a lot of time, money, and development for the last year of these regulations when we know the cars are going to be significantly different next year for it's one thing for one of the top teams like McLaren or Ferrari or, who they're all vying for the millions and millions of euros that the Constructors' Championship brings to them. The other teams, they're fighting for lack of a better term, the scraps. And to take and the different, and even though the difference is, 10, $11 million, the cost of developing everything in order to make up that one place in the Constructors' Championship may not be worth it. They may be looking at their performance and saying, okay, eighth is the best we can hope for this year. To get to seventh in the Constructors,
right.
we would have to spend 40 million pounds, euros, whatever, to only gain back. And so it's that whole cost benefit analysis, that I guarantee there's some bean counter, in the UK right now who has gone through all of that and said, okay, this is how much, you would have to spend. This is how much, this is where you could plan, you could reasonably expect to finish in the year. And the offset and the difference of money spent versus money gained from the Constructors' Championship, it's not worth it. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we also got the news this week that apparently Aston Martin has come out and said that Newey is 100% focused on the 2026 Aston Martin, and he will not be providing any development towards the 2025 Aston Martin. Your thoughts?
Fantastic. I think that's exactly where they need to focus him on, because again, this year is almost a throwaway year for so many different constructors. Let's do as good as you can, keep moving at the pace that you can, but focus in on 2026 and put all your efforts there, because like what we've already said, Lance isn't going to be there next year. It's going to be either another more talented driver, or it's going to be Max, which is by far a more talented driver. So you want that car to be the best spec that you can. You need to have him being Newey, designing 100% of his time on that new car. Like you said, Newey's best when the regulations change, because he can read between the lines of what was said versus what was intended, and he can make the most of that.
Absolutely. I heard somebody say once upon a time that Adrian Newey can find a loophole the size of a quarter and figure out a performance gain that's the size of, like, a giant, the giant silver plate that they hand out at the Australian Grand Prix. That's one of the things that Adrian Newey is better than anybody. He pores over that rule book and he finds, and in the way that his mind works is that he's able to find every single loophole and every single gray area in the rule book. I mean, it was like somebody I heard say, it's like basically there's two rule books. There's the rule book that the FIA has written, and then there's the rule book of loopholes that they've closed up that Adrian Newey found. and it is so very true. There are so many things that he just thinks differently than just about any other designer on the car designer on the planet, and it's a thing of beauty. And so I think that having him focus 100% of his immense brain capacity on the next car with the new rule changes, and allowing the team to take the team that already designed and built the 2025 car, let them continue to take and do the development on that car, but let him focus all of his talent and energies towards the next car. And I think that is absolutely the best way and the smartest way to go.
Right. No, I wholeheartedly agree.
Moving on to our next item. So did you see the news that our friend Ben, the president of the FIA, is now reevaluating the penalties for cursing in Formula One, and he's looking at backing them down or completely, stepping back from them? And your thoughts on it?
I think it was beyond idiotic in the first place. They definitely need to be repealed 100%. I mean, we're all adults here. Yes, there are children watching, but there is a bleep. So if the drivers curse, the kids don't hear it. Their sensitive ears don't hear it. So we know what they're saying. The kids more than likely know what they're saying, so, but they don't have to hear it. So that rule never made sense. It was dumb to begin with.
Yes.
Yet another reason why I think that he needs to go.
Yep. And I could not agree with you more, because I think that trying to take cursing out of Formula One is like trying to hold back the tides. It's a waste of time. It is a war that he cannot win. That is the reason why Sky Sports, BBC, all of these broadcast outlets have what's referred to here in the States, at least, with, I don't know what they refer to it overseas or anything, but here in the States, we refer to it as the dump button, which is where a sensor because everything is on a time delay of, anywhere between 5 to 15 seconds. So they have the ability to take and hit that button and bleep out those curse words or silence it or whatever, so that they don't make it to air. They've been using that for years. Why all of a sudden are they trying to take it out now altogether, so that the kids don't even hear the bleep? I guarantee you, the kids are not dumb. They know what that bleep is, but just because they hear the bleep doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to affect them in any way. It's not like, it's the whole argument of, oh, well, they heard it on TV, so they're going to use that word. I guarantee you their friends are using language 10 times worse than that.
Yeah.
So it was a losing battle. It was a stupid idea. And I for one, will be happy to see it go the way of the dodo bird.
Yeah.
All right. So last couple things. So first of all, did you see the news this week about the possibility of Helmut Marko retiring and who he has basically handpicked as his successor?
I hope that that's true.
So for those of you who don't know, what Corey and I are talking about is Helmut Marko, who is one of the heads over at Red Bull, has basically alluded to the fact that he is seriously considering retirement. Now, there's no timeline or anything to it, and but the thought is out there. And the other thing is that rumor has it that he has handpicked as his successor, Mr. Sebastian Vettel will take over at Red Bull as the head. And I, for one, think this is absolutely fantastic. But also, I have heard from a fairly reliable source that it's more or less almost a done deal. And the fact that it's really going to come down to is how well Red Bull has developed the 2026 car, of whether he decides to retire at the end of this season or whether he decides to wait one more season and retire at the end of 2026.
So the only thing that I don't like about this, the only thing, is the dream that I am keeping alive that Vettel's coming back to drive for Formula One. He's not, but I'm keeping the dream alive.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would be awesome to see him back in a car again, but I think he is enjoying life way too much outside of the car and not having that stress. He is having way too much fun.
Yep.
He's having so much fun as being a coach to young and up and coming drivers. His work with the F1 Academy, the all female, lower tier. He's having so much fun working with these girls and helping to build them up and everything, that I think that he's become such a great ambassador for the sport that I don't think he really has any desire to come back and compete anymore. Yeah. He's having too much fun otherwise. But I think him coming back and being the head at Red Bull and being the guy who is responsible for talent, I think some of the missed opportunities that Red Bull's had in promoting the correct driver into that second seat, I think that we will see a lot less of that once you have Sebastian running the show, if he indeed decides to take the job. And I think it would just be absolutely phenomenal for the sport. I think it would be phenomenal for Red Bull. So bring it on. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, I think him and Horner really, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit too harsh in this critique, but I think they really especially of late, have fostered somewhat of a poisonous culture there at Red Bull, and removing at least part of them out of there, especially somebody as good as Sebastian Vettel, having him in there and helping him change the culture. Oh, I think that would be nothing but good stuff, good things for Red Bull moving forward.
No, absolutely. So I like I said, I welcome the idea immensely.
Yeah, same here. It's making me laugh.
Yeah. So, okay, so last thing is I just thought this was a cool piece of news. So I threw it in here before we get to our Miami Grand Prix. But did you see that the helmet that Ayrton Senna wore during the 1992 season, and it was the helmet that he wore at Spa-Francorchamps in that season, sold at auction for almost $1 million, which broke the record for the most money ever paid for a driver-worn helmet by a considerable amount, because before that, the record was for another Senna helmet that had gone for, I don't have the figure in front of me, but it was like roughly 200 and something $1,000. So this one absolutely blew it away.
Wow.
But the big thing about it is the reason why this helmet was so special was that at Spa in 1992, Eric Comas had a very, very scary shunt. And when Senna drove by the car and he saw Comas hunched, slumped over in the car, he knew that something was really, really wrong. And so Senna, being, he was a fierce competitor, but he also had the presence of mind because he didn't want to see somebody else get hurt. He literally stopped the car, his McLaren, switched off the engine, pulled himself out of the car, and went back and held Comas's head steady while he was waiting, while the marshals were making their way to the accident. And Comas has said in multiple interviews that if it had not been for Senna stabilizing his neck, that he would have died. He would have never even made it to the hospital. Yes, because I want to say I don't have the exact diagnosis in front of me from when the accident happened, but he actually fractured several vertebrae in his neck, and because he didn't have that ability to hold his head up, that he could have very well have died in the car. Wow. And Senna saved his life. Comas has said that many, many times, that the only reason why he is here today is, and he made a full recovery and everything, don't get me wrong, but he said that the only reason why I'm alive today is because of Senna's assistance while the marshals were making their way to the accident.
Wow, that's amazing, right?
So yeah, so the fact that the helmet went for that much and it had that kind of provenance is just amazing. And I just thought it was just a really, really cool story.
Yeah, it is. Very much so.
All right, so let's get into our Miami preview real quick before we wrap up for today. So first of all, we'll talk more about the track at Miami during next week's podcast. But we're coming up. This is year 3 of the Miami Grand Prix. First year Max won it. Last year, famously, Lando won the race, taking his first victory in Formula One. There's been people who have said, it's turned into a great event. There's some who have called it, the Monaco of the US because of the fake marina that they build where they actually have boats actually parked in the quote unquote fake marina at the track edge and things like that. So it's turning into a really good, a really solid event. When they first said that they were going to Miami, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be awful. But I have to say that, Miami is starting to become, a favorite, not just of mine, but of fans, around the world. So your thoughts, first of all, your thoughts on Miami before we get into how we think this weekend's going to go.
Yeah, it's, as far as the U.S. Grand Prix are concerned, it's my second favorite. I like Austin the most, and I wouldn't even really count Las Vegas, so I'll only admit to 2 races in the U.S. But it's a great race. Great racing has always happened there. I'm I think Lando and especially Max do really, really well at that track as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Miami. I have driven it in the sim. It's the Miami, has some very, very, challenging and interesting corners. There's the one section coming out and we'll get more into it next week. But there's a couple of really challenging corners that if you don't get it exactly right,
Yeah.
and I'll talk more about the specific corners next week. But if you don't get it exactly right and the car gets even the least little bit unstable, you're off in the wall, you're in the barrier.
Yeah.
And, so it's a fun track to drive, and it's got some very, very quick sections in it, and some spots where, it's, really challenges the mechanics of the car, both the mechanic people, but also the mechanical systems of the car, in the braking and everything. You've got to really, really have the brakes dialed in at a track like
Oh
Miami.
yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So real quick, tell me your podium for this weekend.
I'm going to go with it's hard, but I'll go with Piastri, number one, Leclerc, and I'm going to pick Max. He does really well at this track.
All right. Cool. So let's see here. Okay. And all right, so I am going to go a little bit different. I think that, he's going to return to the scene of the crime, and I think that it's going to be Lando on the top step this week. I think it's going to be Oscar is going to be a very very close second.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make the prediction of that Oscar will finish within 3 seconds of
All right.
Lando at the end. So it's going to be Lando, Oscar, and Max. So, last thing before we call it a day. Give me your most bold prediction, or give me a prediction of something.
Hamilton will be fourth.
Oh, I like that one. I like that one a lot.
Maybe it's more hope than anything else, but he'll be fourth.
All right, then. I like it. Well, I'm going to actually make 2 predictions. I'm going to make one very bold prediction, and I'm going to make one prediction that I know is absolute, that I will, as anyone who knows me, I am not a betting man. I firmly believe in only betting on a sure thing, and there's no such thing as a sure thing. But this is one thing that my first prediction is going to be something that I can almost guarantee you is going to happen, in the fact that Stroll will be bounced from qualifying in Q1 yet again.
Wow. Okay. All right. That's a good one.
And the second one that I'm going to say is I think that George Russell will be on pole at the end of qualifying on Saturday. That's my bold prediction.
Okay. Good one.
All right. So you ready to get on out of here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the time has come for Corey and I to go slather ourselves in sunscreen, grab a mojito, and gird our loins for the action this weekend. Join us next week when Corey and I will break down all the happenings from this weekend in Miami, plus more trivia and an all-new tech corner. So until next time, he's Corey, I'm Scott. We're the pundits of F1 Brake Check. Let's go!
Thank you for listening to F1 Brake Check. If you have enjoyed what you heard, don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher, or you can watch the video version on YouTube. Help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. You can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok and X at F1 Brake Check. Our website is f1brakecheck.com, where you will find links to all our content. We value your passion and your feedback, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Brake Check is a production of Brake Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Broom, until next time, keep yourself inside track limits, and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.